So hi everyone, my name is Prosper Michael. I am going to be running a session with you guys on meta-debating today. The aim of this session is to move you from being a good debater to a great debater, because you would find yourself in a lot of rooms where you are surrounded by good debaters. And for you to win, you have to be a great debater. So the goal here is to help you transition from good to great. I hope I pulled out successfully. I have some slides prepared. I would share them now. Great. Okay, cool. I'm assuming you guys can still see me. Can you guys see the slide on the screen? Henaku, can you see the slide on the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, cool. I tried very hard to be a cool guy. I have grown older, so you would see a lot of dad jokes in here because it's my attempt at being cool. Please donate a laughter or two when you can, because it would be very sad if I feel like I told a cool joke and no one laughs. So you can just send a laughing emoji, even if you don't find it funny. So yeah, the session is on meta debating, and I titled it Meta Debating Like Zuckerberg Doing BP, because Facebook, Meta debating. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't do BP, but if he was doing BP, that would be the session, meta debating. All right, first unsuccessful joke. Let's proceed. So I would want to begin by having us like go through some questions that you need to ask yourself. And these questions would form the background as to how you should conceive some of the things we're going to talk about. First question I think you need to ask yourself when you think about why meta debating is important is, why do we lose debates we know we won? I'm sure a number of you have found yourself in positions where you are super certain you won this round. You are super certain that the average intelligent voter should know that you won this round. Yet, it does not translate to that when the call is given. You find yourself in a position where the call is unfavorable to you, and you generally don't even understand how you lost that debate or how you placed second as opposed to placing first. And if you ask yourself why, you'd realize that there's a disconnect in the conversation that you sought to present. The manner in which the judge understood it was different from how you intended for them to understand it. These are the reasons why we oftentimes lose debates that we are meant to win. And it's very important that you keep that in mind. Another question you need to ask yourself is the judge the problem or is it me? And I gave a free tip. It is you, because it is primarily your job to make sure that whatever you are communicating to the judge is something the judge can understand and assimilate. So you are expected to communicate in the most effective manner possible. Meta debating essentially is supposed to be an attempt at you pursuing better understanding or pursuing getting the judge to better understand what you are trying to communicate. So if the judge does not understand, they are not the problem. You are the problem, because much like in everyday conversations and in everyday interactions, you might not meet the most intelligent person who understands everything, but you are still expected to convince them. So you need to know that there is a way in which this can be done in debating, and this session essentially is supposed to be a process in understanding that. I think someone is unmuted. I can't tell who it is. But I guess the last question you need to ask yourself is how you can do better. And I think essentially that could be done with more meta debating. Erin, you were unmuted for a sec. Okay, cool. So I think more meta debating is going to help you like go about this much more successfully. I guess the most important thing then is how to go about doing meta debating and how to do it effectively to a point at which you know that you are winning the round regardless of who's judging the round. Cool. So let's jump straight into it.
Something important. I'll catch you later. I'm not hungry.
Please mute yourself, Aaron and Shari or Doi or Shal or Doi. Okay, so what is meta debating? I have a couple of things. So first, the manner in which you need to conceptualize meta debating is it essentially is debating about the debate itself. The goal here is for you to shape how the judge interprets arguments, clashes, burdens, and impacts. Within every debate, there is a conversation that is ensuing. You are presenting bare facts, you are presenting bare impacts, bare burdens, and bare clashes. The goal of meta debating is to get you to communicate that impact, communicate that clash, communicate that burden in a manner in which the judge is better positioned to accept them as they come from you and to prioritize them for what they are, which is a winning argumentation or a winning contribution to the debate. The goal here in therefore is to find ways in which you can conceptualize a win or get the judge rather to conceptualize a win off the back of what you are saying, given that there are multiple other things being said within the round. So you think the debate's about A versus B, and the other person thinks the debate's about something else. Meta debating essentially is you attempting to debate about the debate. So why is this debate supposed to be in this manner? Why must it be about impact or why must it be about deterrence? Your ability to understand this or to get the judges to understand this rather is going to give you a higher chance of winning the round. And that's why meta debating, that's what meta debating seeks to do. I think it's important equally to note that whilst broad debating strategy has to do with identifying and contributing clashes, burdens, and impacts, meta debating has to do with burden allocation, establishing conditions for winning. So a lot of people do this, but they do it without clear intention. When there's a clear intent of meta debating, you would realize that the manner in which it plays out is different. So you don't accidentally say things like, the reason we should win is ABC. Or you don't accidentally say, if up wants to win, they should do this. You are very, very conscious of what you are saying and why it particularly is relevant or why it should play out in the manner in which it's playing out. I guess the last thing then is just noting that it utilizes all the facets of debating. So it utilizes framing, it utilizes characterization, but it specifies why they should be considered important and what they aim to achieve. So you are essentially providing some sort of commentary on what each single thing you are doing essentially should achieve. There is a conversation about why meta debating is different from meta commentary and why meta commentary is essentially different from meta argumentation. But all those fragmentations are very, very unimportant in the grand scheme of things. The most important thing is to note that you need to find a way to get the judge or the judges to flow with whatever it is you're contributing to the debate in the manner in which you're going about it. And that's essentially the goal of meta debating. So why is meta debating super important? First, it's important to realize that judges often make decisions in very ambiguous rounds. I know this because since I started judging, I oftentimes find myself in rooms where I do not get what exactly you guys are talking about because everybody seems to be talking about something different. And in such rooms, often tagged parallel rooms, it becomes particularly difficult for you to figure out how exactly to go about assessing the debate or establishing what the debate is about as a judge. If that happens, it oftentimes puts a lot of power in the hands of the judges. So you'd find yourself in a room where you know that third and second is a close call, and you wish you are the one who gets a second, because you know that the team that has won the round is very clear and the team that is fourth in the round is very clear, but there is some ambiguity between third and second. If you want to find a way to avoid such situations, or if you want to have like some level of satisfaction knowing that this is something that you were able to game a little better, you can do that if you effectively meta debate. So meta debating is super important for clarifying ambiguous rounds and showing why you've done better in sweeping the win or being comparatively better than another team in an ambiguous round. But secondly, biases are never truly abandoned unless they are exposed. So meta debating is effective in identifying the biases that most likely are going to play out within a round. One of my favorite debates, if not my favorite debate, is the semifinals of Duxbridge Worlds. And the opening half was so fun for me. The motion is, this house believes the state is morally illegitimate. Is it the existence of the state is morally illegitimate? I've forgotten the exact wording, but it was questioning the moral legitimacy of the state. And OG characterizes the debates to flag how moral legitimacy is not necessarily tied to impacts. OO comes and says it needs to be tied to impacts. And they go about, I don't know. I think one of the teams was saying it is tied to impact. The other team was saying it's not tied to impact. Bottom line is, there was a huge back and forth as to whether or not it should be tied to impact or it should not be tied to impact. But it was clear that every team was trying to contribute to which way the debate should be seen. How should the debate be evaluated? Should it be evaluated consequentially, or should it be evaluated deontologically? And this became grounds upon which any well-meaning judge could better understand what kind of debate they want to have or they expect to see, and how they can go about using the contributions within the round to assess who best contributes to that debate effectively and who wins in that debate effectively. So if you are able to identify the biases that most likely would emanate, because if we are talking about the state, we most likely are going to be talking about all the many good things the state has done for us. Once you flag that this debate cannot be about all the good things or bad things that the state has done, it elevates the debate from a conversation around the ups and downs of the state and moves it to a way different conceptualization of whether or not it exists as a necessary entity that needs to self-perpetuate for whatever reasons. And then you can have a debate in that world. But you need to be very conscious of the kind of biases that most likely will play out in the round and flag them. And with meta debating, you most likely can effectively do this. The third thing is, teams that control the evaluation lens of a debate usually win close calls. I already flagged how in some rounds, deciding between second and third is hard. In some rounds, it's first and second. We don't know who to give the win to in first and second. A lot of debates oftentimes have the contentions in pairs. So should we give this team the first or the second? Or should we give this team the third or the fourth? Very rarely would you find debates where every single role is in complete anarchy. If that is the case, it most likely implies that the panel just generally has different things that they were looking at. And if that equally is the case, it equally implies that nobody within the debate puts in enough of an attempt to debate the debates to them, to meta debates to them why certain things are relevant and other things are not. So you might want to keep in mind that if you want to evade close calls or have close calls tilt in your favor, you should explore meta debating. Last thing is just like, it is especially useful for extensions and closing teams. So with closing teams, you most likely are trying to enter into the debates. You guys probably know like the three ways in which extensions manifest. It could be a vertical extension, a horizontal extension, or just a responsive extension. Whichever one it is, you need to show how it uniquely swings the debate in your favor. And that happens with meta debating. So I'm going to be very methodical in explaining how we can go about this and what exactly this should look like. I think I have reasonably covered what meta debating is and why it is important. And now we can just delve straight into meta debating, or how to debate about the debates. But I just want to add one last tip that is perhaps like quite interesting to like note. You'd realize that at the end of this of every round you do, when you are exchanging handshakes with people outside the room and you're just passing compliments to one another, everybody starts sharing what they thought each team was trying to achieve within a debate. Everybody starts sharing, oh, I think what you were trying to go for was this. I think that was very, very effective because I think it would have been understood as this and it would play out as this. What essentially goes on after a debate is meta debating. Those conversations you engage in to pierce through the veil of the debate and just analyze and assess how every team entered into the debate, what they wanted to achieve, and whether or not they succeeded in achieving those things. That is meta debating. So instead of doing that after the round, do that within the round. And if you do that within the round, you are assured that baseline, you would be understood. Baseline, they know that this is what you are contributing and why you think that contribution is important. And this is the most important baseline in debating for me, because a lot of times it's just might not go your way no matter how hard you try. But it is just much more painful when you feel like everything you've said has just flown under the radar and nobody got you. I don't think that's cool. So let's find out ways to stop that from happening. So how do we enter into meta debating? What are the areas that meta debating often happens? I think the first point in which there oftentimes is a lot of conversation about what the debate should be about, or what conditions should be established for a team to win the debate, is often during framing battles. So in framing battles, every team comes with a competing conception of what the debate is about. Should it be about justice, or should it be about reform? Should it be about deterrence, or should it be about getting critical mass? Should it be about A or B? In these framing battles, there are a lot of different conceptions that could be introduced as to what the debate should look like, what the debate should be about, what frame is welcome within the debate. The reason why framing battles are the most effective point at which you need to enter into the debate is because they form the bedrock of what the judge conceptualizes the dilemma in the conversation to look like. Because every debate is essentially a dilemma. Do I allow for the feminist movement to keep allowing Twitter feminists to claim that choice feminism is not a thing? Or do we clamp down on Twitter feminists and call them out for shitting on choice feminism? Forgive me, I use a lot of curse words. I'm trying to be a better man. I have not succeeded. I know who I am and I would not pretend. When I succeed, I'll let you know. So yeah, should we stop people from doing that or not? That is a dilemma, because every debate is essentially a dilemma. If your ability to frame the debate is one that leaves you on the losing end of how that dilemma is conceptualized, you most likely are going to lose out in that debate. As such, it's super efficient for you to start debating about the debate right from the framing battle. So say the motion is, this house regrets choice feminism, and you are on the gov side trying to establish why choice feminism is something that we should regret. If you are providing a frame and the frame goes something like, panel, we think that every single choice that is made has the ability to further entrench patriarchal narratives or to detract from patriarchal narratives. It is then important that we abolish things like choice feminism that believe that every single choice, whether or not it emboldens patriarchy, is still a choice that is valid, because choices that embolden the patriarchy are not valid choices. And as such, we should not endorse them as the feminist movement. The reason this is important is, and then you give your arguments. At the point at which you provide this frame, what you have successfully done is you've painted a narrative, you've created a world. A lot of debaters say, in our world, the world you have created is that frame that you've provided. If you successfully establish that frame, a lot of people stop there and they move on to providing their arguments. It's important you note that framing battles are grounds upon which you could equally inject some meta debating. This can be done in several ways, which we are going to talk about much later. But you should note that frames in themselves create an atmosphere that already starts shaping the conception of how the judge is going to see debating or see the round. And if you do not outrightly establish why your frame is something that is relevant, you most likely are going to suffer from two things. One, you most likely are going to suffer from the harm of a counter frame. A counter frame is going to be provided from the other side of the debate. This is the most likely thing you are going to suffer from, because everybody wants to frame the debate in a manner in which is going to be favorable to them. If you do not insulate yourself from the most likely counter frame, you will find yourself in a world wherein you lose out. I think it's important to note that a lot of counter frames revolve around a presumption that your frame is inequitable. So it is important that to avoid framing battles or to succeed in framing battles, what you need to do is to make sure that you establish what you think is like more effective through the meta debating we are going to do in the round. So I think like that's possibly the first thing you need to keep in mind. But the second way in which you need to note that an inability to meta debate could harm you in a framing battle is when engaging with your closing. And this more likely is going to be pernicious to you if you are the opening team in a round. If you Emmanuel, you're muted. Please mute. Emmanuel, please mute. Thank you. Okay, cool. So if you find yourself in a situation wherein you are meta debating and you have effectively hedged against whatever counter frame will come from the other side, it's important to know that it is equally likely that a different frame could be introduced to the debate from closing. So you're not only hedging against the other side of the debate, you are hedging against the people behind you. So you need to meta debate. You need to establish why this is the most important and reasonable frame upon which the debate can happen, so much so that this is foundational. Even if some different frame that covers a niche group is introduced to the debate, we still win the debate from our side. So that makes us particularly a step ahead. I think that's like super important when engaging with the round. So it's something that you equally need to keep in mind. I guess the last thing then is just on like noting that when you effectively provide reasonable justification or a reasonable explanation as to why the frame you've provided is the frame upon which the debate foundationally needs to happen, you succeed in avoiding a lot of failed characterization and like framing clashes that most likely would ensue within the round. And this insulates you from losing out. I think this is super important for me because I particularly enjoy. Yeah. Sorry. I think this is important because I particularly enjoy a lot of these situations where a team establishes why their frame is relevant, and it just like insulates you from a lot of unnecessary like mechanistic quibble or quibble around who did what better. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next area. Meta debating oftentimes happens. So meta debating also happens when there is a burden push. Who must prove what? Is it important to prove perfect execution of a policy in this debate or not? This is the most important part of meta debating in certain tight rooms, because this is the grounds upon which a lot of expectations are leveled against individuals, because some burdens are unfair burdens that you should not accept within a round. So it's a motion about the patriarchy, because I don't know, I've been talking about the patriarchy with my friend a lot today. So sorry if I use too many feminist examples. It's a motion about the patriarchy and why the patriarchy is bad and how we are going to tone down the excesses of the patriarchy. And a team from the other side, burden pushes to you. You need to prove to us why, at the end of this debate, you are going to successfully end the patriarchy, or why you are going to successfully prevent any woman from going through pain. These are very unfair burdens that you need to effectively identify. A burden push of this nature puts you in a position where you assume that the debate can only be won when you effectively satisfy that question that has been leveled against you. It's important to note that meta debating becomes super relevant at this point. Why? Because some burden pushes are merely attempts to break the motion and put you in an unfair position. What does this look like? So in the Ghanaian debate space, they call it the dark arts. When certain things that are completely unnecessary are thrown your way and you are asked to prove it. So the debate is about whether or not, I don't know, whether or not nationalism is a good thing or a bad thing. And someone asks you to prove why immigration is good or bad. Immigration can have an overlap within the debates. But even if you lose on the immigration charts, it does not mean that you've lost on the broader conversation of nationalism. And if you meta debate why this is something that is not a fair burden, you are able to circumvent such an unfair burden push. Aaron, please mute. I think that in the event where you do not meta debate effectively why certain burden pushes are unfair burden pushes, you find yourself in a position wherein you consistently are going to have to circumvent certain claims that ordinarily are not claims you should even attempt proving or disproving. So you might want to discuss with the judge or discuss with the panel why certain things should not be burdens that are placed on you. So it's very effective to meta debate at that point. Second thing, or sorry, third thing is during weighing. It's important to meta debate during weighing. I think weighing is very relevant not only on the basis of similar metrics, but on different metrics. So if what you are presenting is a win off the back of scale, we affect a larger amount of people or a larger area within the debate, and the other person is weighing off the back of intensity. So this is a small area, but they are the more vulnerable entity. You need to meta debate why weighing off the back of scale, larger number of people is more important than protecting the minority that unfortunately happens to be the most vulnerable entity within the debate. If you are able to successfully do this, you clarify that engagement of who should we prioritize more? Should we prioritize the vulnerable entity, or should we prioritize everyone else that constitutes the majority that perhaps is harmed to a certain degree? If you successfully do this, you are able to clear up for the judge why they should assess the debate off the back of that. This is a very important judging heuristic equally, because some things seem de facto, they seem like de facto truths. So you realize that a lot of closing teams always defer to most vulnerable entity kind of extensions. If you do not establish prior to that particular conversation why the debate has to be judged on the larger amount of impact, it consistently is not going to be a debate you can win. Because when they come with a chat around, oh, this is the most vulnerable entity and we need to protect them, they sound more appealing, they sound more interesting, and people most likely are going to opt for that. You need to make sure that you are not the team that is misunderstood, or that is undercut, your impacts are undercut because you did not spend time hedging against such a concern. So I think you should hedge against such a concern. Equally, you can meta debate when you're discussing the actor. This is very, very important because outside of actor debates, there are other debates where you need to do a stakeholder analysis, because there are a lot of entities that are affected by the debate or by the conversation that is ensuing. If you effectively flag why certain entities are much more important than other entities, so much so that we need to pursue the gains of said entities, you can effectively win in a round of that nature. So everybody's arguing why we need to think about the interest of the Ukrainian people in a debate about the Russia-Ukraine war. And you are talking about why we need to think about the interest of the whole world and not just the Ukrainian people. And another person is talking about why we need to think about the interest of the American people. These are all valid actors that are affected by the debate. It is up to you to flag why certain actors are more important and how that affects the debate. An example of this looks like this. In the same illustration, the debate is about the Russia-Ukraine war. And you want to talk about why the American people are the ones we should prioritize, and their concerns are the concerns we should prioritize in the conversation. So after establishing why this is going to affect the American people and what's not, you need to then meta debate why the American people are relevant. The American people are absolutely relevant in this debate because the political will that is established by the American people becomes grounds upon which whatever relief is sent by the American government to the Ukrainian people would be sent. This is of paramount importance because even if they win the war against Russia, they would need aid to reconstruct their state. If there is no political will from the American people, the USA cannot intervene, less of all intervene successfully. If there is no political will by the American people, if they lose, if the Ukrainians lose the war, it is equally quite likely then that we still would not get a lot of help provided Zelensky and his armies in that regard. So the most important thing is how we can help them. And we can only help them if the American people are satisfied and they can then embolden their government to make certain decisions that would go in the favor of the Ukrainian people. So whether the Ukrainian people are happy or unhappy by this decision, it takes a back seat to the more relevant actor who has the capacity to intervene, which is the American people. As such, whoever wants to win this debate needs to win off the back of establishing why the American people are important. Such an actor analysis and meta debating as to why said actor is important becomes the bedrock upon which a deprioritization of certain actors within the debate is born. If you do not do such meta debating and you just flag, oh, the American people are going to be harmed by this and this is bad. Yeah, it is bad, but it is going to be favorable to the Ukrainian people. And these guys have shown why it's important for us to help the Ukrainian people. At the point at which you are a step ahead to show why this actor is the most important actor, you win off of a meta debating front and you are able to go about it. The last I'm going to talk about is just characterization control. So in in framing and characterization, oftentimes there is a complete neglect of all the many facets that make up an actor. So certain actors are not as monochromatic as we would want them to be. And if we do not find ways to establish the multiple ways in which they play out, or some of the things they play out, we might find ourselves in a very dire position. Juanita, kindly mute. So it's likely going to be something that plays out in a couple of this, in a couple of ways. Juanita, please mute. Juanita Ofori Amachi, please mute. Amechi, bro, I apologize if I butchered your name. But so the manner in which this works out is in a couple of ways. Actors are quite complex entities. Regardless of who it might be, it's a very complex entity because people are not single-minded. People are made up of various things. So there are various interests at play, and there are equally various considerations at play. If you are able to establish certain considerations that are very important to this actor, very proximate to this actor, very likely to be taken into consideration by this actor, then it's important then that you flag that this is an important characterization. The problem, however, is sometimes people just flag that this is an important characterization and they leave it at that. They do not show the extent to which this affects the debate. They just go, oh, this is an important characterization, and off the back of that characterization, they then build their case. It's important to note that if you do not establish why said characterization affects things, you'd find yourself in a position wherein that characterization does not it does not hold as much water to the judge as you'd want it to. This is equally true because, as I said, a lot of entities are not monolithic. They are not monoliths. So you need to make sure that all the many things that are said are not going to confuse the judge or are not going to be taken on equal level by the judge, because some things are more proximate than others. I don't know. Kim Kardashian, she is a mother. She is a billionaire. Is she a billionaire or a millionaire? I think she's a billionaire. I am not sure. Someone would have to clarify. But she is a mother. She's a billionaire. She is a divorcee. She is a model. She is a businesswoman. All these are many things that are characteristics of Kim. I would argue that the most important characteristic of Kim is the fact that she is a mother. It is something that is super relevant to her, and decisions that will be made need to be made with a recognition of the fact that she is a mother. Please give me a sec. I need to text someone. Okay, cool. All right. So if you're able to establish why that characteristic of her being a mother is super important, then you can move on to talking about why that characteristic becomes the most important thing that needs to be considered within the round. So much so that when people are talking about her business acumen and how certain decisions would affect her business acumen, or when people are talking about her modeling career and how certain decisions would affect her modeling career, you can establish why those considerations are secondary and why those considerations do not work out well. And at the point at which you do that, you most likely would insulate yourself from certain concerns within the round. So I think it's like super relevant to keep that in mind. Um, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. So now let's talk about like common meta debating tactics that you could employ and how you can go about doing them effectively. I don't know why my laptop is glitching or my laptop is glitching. So forgive me if I do not follow the structure. So the first thing you need to keep in mind when like thinking how you can tactically meta debate is by, and I'm going to tie each and every one of them to some of the entry points I flagged earlier, which are the points at which you can engage in meta debating. So first is you can do that when you are reframing the debate. So this debate isn't about results. This debate is about moral permissibility of a particular action. So I already gave an example of that when I was talking about the debate about um, the moral legitimacy of the state. So I would not dwell on this much. You just need to note that once you are able to communicate what that reframing looks like, it establishes the ground upon which the debate is going to be assessed. And then you need to justify why it works. So meta debating becomes effective at the point at which you consciously note that the very frame of the debate, which should form its bedrock, is particularly questionable. Second thing you can do is just to talk about or engage in meta debating by preempting the meta argumentations that will come from the other side. So this looks like even if Op says this about principles, that is still illegitimate because of XYZ. So preempting the kind of conversations that would ensue equally become a very important ground for meta debating because they lay down the rubrics of the round to the judge. The most likely arguments that will come in this debate will come from this perspective. This perspective is a perspective you need to deprioritize because of XYZ. I think this perhaps is the most effective way to meta debate when you know exactly what the debate would look like, when you can game what the debate most likely is going to look like. I would want to add a caveat here that you are not under any obligation to figure out all the possible ways in which this could go wrong. You cannot control the extent to which human beings can be stupid. So if someone has a very, very stupid argument, you most likely cannot preempt it, right? But that's fine. You are expected to preempt the most likely reasonable arguments. And that is what you are expected to hedge against. Trust me, if it's a very stupid argument, it is quite likely that the judge themselves would realize that this is a very stupid argument, and they most likely are not going to engage in prioritizing such a conversation. But for the more reasonable lines of argumentation, they oftentimes operate off the back of certain things that you can almost certainly gain. You would know in a debate about jail terms that we are most likely discussing on one side why if we increase the jail term or the punishment for a particular crime, we are trying to increase the deterrence that most likely comes with the conception of that crime. And on the other side, they most likely would want to talk about how we need to prioritize proportionality or why they think the state has failed them and people as such have entered into a world in which they cannot do anything but commit crime in an attempt to avenge, in an attempt to fend for themselves. These are things you can game out, especially if you're an experienced debater who has been debating for quite a while. If you can game them out, you need to start hedging against them right from the top of the debate and effectively make sure that you avoid these things. I would flag again that beyond the fact that this in itself is an effective way to engage with the debate, it really just strips every team that most likely wants to engage through that pathway of whatever wow factor that they might come with. So you most likely are succeeding in hedging against any level of surprise elements that is going to be introduced within the debate. So you know that, yeah, I already flagged this and why this is not important. So they already have an uphill battle before they come into the debate to speak about these things. And if you are speaking after and you are trying to hedge against something of this nature, like if you realize that it is likely that the interpretation of the round is going to go in a particular way, you can preemptively hedge against that interpretation. So yes, we are saying that there is going to be some level of similarity on both sides. On both sides, some lives will be saved. We just think that on our side, we have marginally more lives being saved, and that is very important. So they cannot get away with winning the debate by claiming, yeah, we also save lives on our side. And it's equally important to note this because a lot of rounds are oftentimes symmetricized, which is very stupid if you ask me, because it obviously is likely that we can save lives on both sides. The question is, who saves more lives? And this is equally why I think it is very, very inefficient for you to engage in symmetricizing a debate. If you are going to be engaging in a round, do not just stop at saying that it is also present on our side. Why is it sufficient in its presence on your side? So we have this, but we don't think we should have more of it. If they want more of it, it comes at XYZ trade-off. And that is an unfair trade-off for us to pursue in that regard because it's going to harm XYZ. If you do that, you are effectively communicating with the judge and meta debating why certain things need to be deprioritized or prioritized. Cool. Next manner or next tactic you can employ in your pursuit of meta debating, crystallizing the meta early. So before the clash, let's clarify the metric for judging these debates. So before you even engage in what's the most likely things look like on both sides, you can establish how the debate should be assessed. I think this is very, very important, especially when you know that there are very clear clashes. Because sometimes these clear clashes that are going to be established within the round are clashes that have no definitive end. If someone is arguing deontologically on one side as to why they think something is bad in and of itself, and on the other side, someone is arguing consequentially as to why something is bad because of all the harms it causes, there is no realistic middle ground because both sides have a reasonable ground to claim the win. What crystallizing the meta looks like is you showing why, specific to the context of this debate, we need to take the deontological approach or we need to take the consequentialist approach. We need to opt for a principled debate for this specific round, or we need to opt for a more pragmatic approach to the debate specific to this round. In the event where you don't do that, you most likely are going to be deferring to whatever the judge considers to be important or considers to be effective on their side. And again, that is not what we want to do. The goal of meta debating is to take away the power of the judge and to make it your power. So, power to the people, I guess. Another horrible dad joke. Sorry. So let's move on. Another common meta debating tactic is you can try responding to meta moves. So this looks like their framing excludes the actual harms we care about in this debate. So if you are attempting to enter into a niche portion of the debate where you are insulated from certain conversations, you could always flag how everything they talk about on a meta level contributes to a particular stream of the debate. But that stream of the debate is something that you have strategically sidestepped because it is irrelevant or it is something that definitively nobody can win on. As such, you do not want to engage in such a conversation, or it is just broadly a very nasty conversation to engage in because it is too murky. At the point at which you do that, you essentially have avoided a particular conversation that has been said to be important by showing how, regardless of how important it is non-determinate nobody can determine on any grounds how they can win on that particular conversation. As such, it's best we do not assess the debate off the back of that. So, on a meta level, the judges should not grant the win off the back of that conversation because it is likely that there would be an effective contribution from their side. But it is equally likely that there is going to be an effective contribution on my side. And it's just going to do your head in as a panel because it is one that is quite non-determinate. So we should not decide a debate off the back of that. We should decide a debate off of something else that is easier to determine, easier to assess, and easier to prove. After doing that, you have successfully avoided a conversation that most likely would have wasted everybody's time. Yes, the meeting is being recorded and is going to be uploaded on YouTube before the close of the week. So yeah. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the very last thing I highlighted, which is just like meta weighing. So meta weighing looks like even if we lose on framing, our impacts still outweigh the impacts from the other side. With this, what you're essentially trying to achieve is to decide what is the most important ground upon which the debate should be decided on. Should it be decided on impacts? Should it be decided on like whose frame is much fairer? I do not think this has a great reach within the debate because yeah, it's in a very, very good room. I don't think anyone is going to be found wanting in that manner. But in mid rooms and in lower rooms, these things become quite important because sometimes there are a lot of impacts that are thrown in by a particular team, but that impact is contingent on a particular frame that is either unproven or unfair. If you are able to establish why, even if all these impacts are true, to the extent where they were born or built off the back of an unfair argumentation or unfair framework, then it is fine for us to count these people out or for us to not to it's fair for us to place ahead of these individuals. You are successfully engaging the debates effectively on like grounds of meta debating, and it can become easier for you to win in such a round. So I think that equally is something you can do, and I would recommend that you do. Um, I'm about to end the debate. Christ Jesus, I'm about to no, I'm Buddhist now. Buddha, dear Buddha. I'm about to end the session, so um, I'm just going to drop some like very relevant tips that you might want to keep in mind. I have just like three things I highlighted. Hi, someone is singing. Please mute.
As we go there, crowd there, no.
Calvin,
Somebody
Calvin,
later.
Calvin, Calvin and Oscar, please mute. Thank you. All right, cool. So I just have three tips. First, it's important to know that judges need a decision-making narrative. And as such, it's your job to construct a decision-making narrative for them. In many tournaments, you'd hear debaters get angry because they expect a judge to know that this is how they should go about judging the round. No, bro, they don't always know. The reason they don't know is because in a very good room, there are multiple viewpoints that are presented within a round. In a very bad room, there are multiple horrible viewpoints that are presented during a round. As such, it needs to be your job to establish why certain heuristics should be adopted. Why should the debate be judged off the back of ABC instead of XYZ? Why should the debate be assessed off the back of this narrative as opposed to that narrative? If you lump it all together, you do not succeed. But if you are methodical in highlighting each aspect of the round, you win on, and why you win on those aspects, you're likely going to win the round. I think it's something that you should definitely keep in mind. Second tip, resolve ambiguity when it happens. Show why certain clashes are a wash. I wrote area wash. There was no space. I didn't put space. Show why certain clashes are a wash. A lot of rounds have very, very ancillary, unnecessary conversations that ensue within them. I watched this debate last week at Nationals. It was a motion around South Africa, and there was a conversation around DistroKid at some point. I was very confused because I don't understand why anyone was talking about DistroKid. But it happened. And I think, what is going on? Okay. And I think like it happens because nobody flags why some of these things need to be avoided within the round. So if you think a certain conversation is a wash, if you think it is completely irrelevant, you need to establish why it is irrelevant. You need to establish why it's a wash. And if you do that successfully, you can win the round much easier. And the last thing is just to be as explicit as possible. I think this is super important and super relevant for a lot of reasons because a lot of things could be left to the imagination of the judge. But if you leave it to the imagination of the judge, you most likely would find yourself wanting. And I don't think you should do that. So you should try to be explicit. I think this covers everything I need to talk about with meta debating. This was supposed to be a very short session. I'm really glad it was under 1 minute, under 1 hour. Not under, it was 1 hour and just a little above. The last thing is just, I had this very cool quote. Good debaters win arguments. Great debaters win how arguments are judged. Nobody said this, so let's claim it was Socrates. This was supposed to be another one of my dad jokes, but I did not deliver it well, so you are not forced to laugh. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to be open to listening to the question now.